Hello YouTube, my name's Sean Connors and welcome back to the NFL Fan Pub. This is video number 10 and this video is going to focus on the tight end tiers that exist in the NFL. And particularly, of course, we're talking about fantasy football. So let's get straight into that. So out on his own in tier 1, of course, is Gronkowski. In mock drafts that I've already been doing so far this year, and again, data that I use serious mock drafts, places where you can get good data from. Gronk's been going anywhere from about pick 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12. So in quite easily you can see in pretty much every draft format, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him not being on the board round 2. So a lot of fantasy owners have already worked out that this is a guy you can target and build a strategy around. So that should be no huge surprise to anybody. I've got Gronk's metrics down as follows. I expect Gronk to get about 194 fantasy points for this season with an upper end of somewhere around about 228, so a massive range of points for this guy. And he's clearly 50-60 points up on the next tier of tight ends, which is absolutely remarkable in any position in fantasy football, so it's no wonder that people are targeting. But unfortunately he is out on his own, there is only one of him. I think from his points it'll be made up of somewhere around about 83 catches, 1,150 yards and around about 12 touchdowns. And I don't think that's going to be too far off the mark, to be honest, unless injury takes hold. And that is the one risk with Gronk, it's injury. But we'll leave him out in a masterclass all of his own and focus on the Tier 2 tight ends in my book, which are as follows. Tier 2 tight ends are made up of the three following candidates. That's Jimmy Graham, Jimmy G, Greg Olsen and Travis Kelce. Greg Olsen, obviously, of Carolina, Travis Kelce of Kansas, and Jimmy Graham has moved to Seattle from New Orleans Saints. Now, Jimmy Graham should get more points than the other two. I'm estimating going to Seahawks, he'll end up with somewhere around about 144 fantasy points. The upper end is only about 157, so I'm fairly confident around this range. About 70 catches, that's going to be made up of 850 yards and about 9 touchdowns. That's where the fantasy production really is going to come from. It's the points rather than the yards in his case. I don't think he's going to quite work for Seattle because I think that because they don't have credible wide receivers, that means that teams can key up, put unusual corners on him, on Jimmy G, and create some interesting problems for Seattle that normally you wouldn't have with the tight ends. So that's why I feel that the tight end production isn't going to quite be there this year. I'm sure that in another year down the line is going to really challenge for top spot again is Jimmy G. Greg Olsen has been solid at Carolina for a few years now, so his metrics is fairly easy to read really. About 132 fantasy points, upper end a bit higher even than Jimmy G, 161. Somewhere around about 80 catches, realistic, 850 yards, similar to Jimmy Graham, but slightly less touchdowns, around about 7. And again, this metric has been spelled out pretty consistent. He's very solid at what he does. He gets on very well, clearly, with Cam Newton. He's targeted and has been for the last 3 years for over 100 attempts. And he doesn't drop too many, obviously, as you can tell from the amount of catches. So he is heavily targeted by Cam, but it's been consistently. And his production is also fairly easy and consistent to read in my book. Then we come on to Travis Kelce. I had him last year. And he had a really good first half of the year. And then he began to fade away, and I switched across to Delaney Walker. I think Travis Kelce is clearly a tight end to tier. I think he's got great upside. I think, when you look at Kansas, didn't throw a single wide receiver touchdown last year. Travis Kelce is definitely going to be one to consider here. Around about 129 fantasy points with an upper end of about 153. 70 catches, I predict, about 870 yards, around about 6 touchdowns. So very, very close to Greg Olsen's production. And maybe a chance to show what he's capable of in that offense. So those are my tier 1, tier 2s, and I'm just briefly going to talk about something because I think it's really important to finish this video off, and that is going to be about Josh Hill of the Saints. Now, a lot of people have been targeting in drafts late, thinking it's a clever pickup to fill the gaps of Jimmy Graham left by the Saints' Josh Hill. And at first glance, it seems like a really solid move to do this. But it's a work in progress, Josh Hill. I think he's tier 3, really, to be perfectly honest with you. And there are a lot of tier 3 tight ends. I mean, you can split hairs over which one's going to elevate himself up a bit here. So, if your strategy is to wait on a tight end, there are so many that can get the sort of point production that Josh Hill can get this year. So don't overreach or overstretch for him. I'm predicting somewhere in the range of about 50 catches, 650 to 700 yards would be fair to say, with roughly 5 touchdowns is realistically the expectation I would have on Josh Hill. This is a work in progress. I think he's going to be good, but it's going to take another year. And there's an old saying in fantasy football, you'd rather be on someone the moment they're on fire than a year late or a year too early. And I think in Josh Hill's case, this could be a year too early. So I would, at this moment in time, think that there are probably other Titans that can probably do a better job, that are in Tier 3 and probably can get you a few more fantasy points. And we have to remember as well, just as we finish this video off, the gulf between Tier 1 and Tier 2 is like 50, 60 fantasy points. The gulf between Tier 1 and Tier 3, you know, you're talking about 70 fantasy points. I mean, it's so big. It's massive. So, you know, or more. I mean, you know, as I say, I mean, I'm only predicting Josh Hill actually for a total of about somewhere around about 90 fantasy points. But there's a lot between 90, 110, 120. There's a lot in that range. So, you know, don't overthink it and don't overstretch for a player. Just, you know, find one that will do the job and build a strategy a different way. So that's my take on the top tier tight ends for this year. Thank you very much for the questions of those who've asked for this video. It's been appreciated, it's been noted, and obviously I hope you like the fact I've delivered. Anyway, all that leaves me to do is to say thank you for watching, take care of yourselves, and happy fantasy gaming, and I'll see you soon.